3 days in a hidden cave with a creature I never believed existed showed me intelligence and compassion beyond anything I thought possible. I went into that storm thinking I understood these mountains and came out realizing how little I truly knew about the world around us. What I discovered in that darkness changed everything I believed about the wild lands of western Montana. I checked the weather forecast 3 times that morning. Clear skies, mild temperatures, light winds. Perfect conditions for a solo hike through the Bitterroot Range. At 46, I'd been hiking these mountains for over 2 decades. I knew the trails, understood the weather patterns, respected the wilderness. Or so I thought. The first hour was exactly what I'd hoped for. Crisp October air, golden aspens trembling in a gentle breeze. The kind of solitude that makes you remember why you need these mountains. I took the North Ridge Trail, planning a 12-mile loop that would have me back at my truck by sunset. Standard route, nothing ambitious. Around noon, I noticed the wind shifting. Not unusual for this elevation, but something about the temperature drop felt wrong. The sky was still clear, but the air carried a metallic taste I couldn't quite place. I should have turned back then. That hesitation, that moment of choosing to trust a forecast over my instincts, nearly cost me everything. Within 20 minutes, the world transformed. Dark clouds boiled over the western peaks like something alive and angry. The temperature plummeted so fast I could actually feel it happening, degree by degree. Then the freezing rain started, not gradually, but all at once, as if someone had thrown a switch. I'd never seen an Arctic front move in that quickly. The freezing rain turned the trail into a skating rink within minutes. Each step became a negotiation with gravity. I pulled my hood tight, but the wind found every gap in my jacket, every weakness in my gear. The rain wasn't falling. It was being driven horizontally, tiny pellets of ice that stung any exposed skin. Visibility collapsed to maybe 15 feet. The familiar landmarks I'd used for years, the lightning-struck pine, the boulder shaped like a bear's head, the creek crossing, all of them vanished into a gray-white void. I tried to follow the trail by feel, but ice was accumulating so fast that within half an hour there was no trail, just white. My hands started going numb first. I flexed my fingers inside my gloves, trying to keep the blood moving, but the cold was relentless. Then came the shivering, violent, uncontrollable shaking that made it hard to think straight. I knew what that meant. Early hypothermia. My body was losing heat faster than it could generate it. I needed to find shelter, fast. That's when I made my second mistake. Instead of staying put and trying to build some kind of emergency shelter right there, I kept moving, kept thinking I could find my way down, find something familiar. The terrain sloped downward to my left, and I convinced myself that following the slope would eventually lead me to the creek, and the creek would lead me out. I was wrong. The rocky slope was a sheet of ice hidden under fresh snow. I didn't see it until my boot hit the slick surface and my feet went out from under me. I slid maybe 20 feet, tumbling, bouncing off rocks I couldn't see. My shoulder slammed into something hard, a boulder or a tree trunk, I never knew which. The impact sent a white-hot spike of pain through my chest and arm. But worse than the pain was what I heard next. The sound of my backpack tearing free and continuing to slide down the slope without me. I lunged for it, fingers scraping ice, but it was gone, disappeared into the storm. Gone with it, my emergency supplies, my fire starter, my water filter, my extra layers, my headlamp. Everything I needed to survive. I lay there for a moment, the wind screaming overhead, ice pellets hammering my face. My shoulder throbbed. My breathing was shallow and rapid. This was bad. This was potentially fatal. I forced myself to stand, had to keep moving, had to find something. But as I stumbled forward through the whiteout, something began to bother me, a sound that didn't belong. At first I thought it was just the wind playing tricks, but no, this was different. Heavy, rhythmic, footsteps. Not the light crunch of a deer or elk, not the quick patter of a mountain lion. Something big, something moving through the storm with a weight and purpose that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I stopped, straining to hear over the wind. Nothing. Maybe I'd imagined it. Then I heard it again, closer this time, parallel to me, maybe 30 feet away through the trees. Something was following me, and whatever it wasn't bothered by the storm at all. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, a branch breaking under the weight of ice, a tree groaning in the wind, the storm distorting sounds, making me paranoid. But deep in my gut, I knew better. Whatever was out there wasn't random. It was pacing me. I changed direction, angling more steeply downhill. The footsteps changed direction too. I sped up, stumbling over hidden rocks and deadfall. The sounds sped up. Not chasing, just maintaining distance, keeping pace. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. The hypothermia was getting worse. My thoughts were starting to fragment, slipping away before I could hold on to them. I knew that was a bad sign. Knew I was approaching the point where my body would start shutting down non-essential functions. Where I'd get confused, make stupid decisions, maybe even feel warm and start taking off my clothes. I'd read about hikers found frozen to death, half naked, because their brains had malfunctioned in the final stages. Was that what was happening to me? Was I hallucinating these sounds? Then the footsteps stopped. Complete silence except for the wind. I froze mid-step, listening so hard my ears hurt. Nothing. Just the storm. I took another step forward. A sound erupted from the trees to my right. Not footsteps this time, but a deep, guttural vocalization. Not quite a growl, not quite a call. Something in between. It resonated in my chest, primal and ancient. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But I couldn't run. Could barely walk. My legs were trembling, my coordination shot. I just stood there, swaying, trying to see through the curtain of ice and snow. That's when the figure appeared. At first, it was just a shadow in the whiteout, a dark mass that seemed impossibly tall. I blinked, convinced my failing brain was conjuring phantoms. But the shadow solidified, stepped closer. It was massive. Had to be 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Covered in dark fur that was matted with ice and snow. The proportions were wrong for a bear. Too upright, shoulders too broad, arms too long. My mind scrambled for explanations. Grizzly standing on its hind legs. Trick of the light. Hallucination. Then it took another step, and I saw the face. Flat, almost human features beneath a heavy brow. Dark eyes that reflected what little light penetrated the storm. A face that showed, what? Intelligence? Curiosity? I couldn't process what I was seeing. Couldn't reconcile it with anything I knew to be real. Bigfoot. Sasquatch. The word flickered through my hypothermic brain like a joke. The cryptid my uncle used to tell stories about around the campfire. The subject of blurry photos and late-night cable documentaries. The thing that didn't exist. Except it was standing right in front of me. I waited for it to charge, to roar, to do whatever large predators do before they attack. Instead, it just watched me for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, it raised one massive arm and gestured, a clear, unmistakable motion. Follow me. I should have been terrified, should have run or screamed, or collapsed. But something in that gesture, the intentionality of it, the almost gentle quality, cut through my panic. Maybe it was the hypothermia scrambling my judgment. Maybe it was something else. But I understood, on some level deeper than logic, that this creature was offering help. It turned and began walking, moving with surprising grace despite its size. After maybe 10 feet, it stopped and looked back at me. The gesture was clear. "Are you coming?" I took a step forward, then another. My legs barely supported me, but I followed. What choice did I have? Though even then, some small voice in the back of my mind whispered, "What if this is worse than freezing?" Following that creature through the storm was like moving through a fever dream. My sense of time had completely dissolved. We could have been walking for 10 minutes or 2 hours. I had no way to know. Every step required total concentration. My boots kept slipping on ice-covered rocks I couldn't see until I was already stepping on them. The Sasquatch moved differently than I did. It didn't slip, didn't hesitate. Its feet found purchase on surfaces that sent me sliding. A few times, when the terrain got particularly treacherous, it would stop and wait, watching to make sure I made it across. Once, when I nearly went down again, it reached back, not touching me, but close enough that I could have grabbed that massive arm if I'd needed to. I kept waiting for my brain to reject what was happening, to wake up from whatever hypothermic hallucination this had to be. But the cold was too real. The pain in my shoulder too sharp. The ice pellets hitting my face too insistent. This was happening. We were climbing now, which made no sense. Down was safety. Down was civilization. But the creature led me up, along a ridge I didn't recognize, through terrain that would have been dangerous even in good weather. The wind was worse up here, screaming across exposed rock faces with enough force to nearly knock me over. Then I saw where we were heading, and my stomach dropped. A cliff face, sheer rock disappearing up into the storm. We were walking directly toward it, and there was nowhere to go. No path I could see, just solid stone. The creature didn't slow down. 20 feet from the cliff, I stopped. I tried to call out, but my voice came out as barely a croak. My throat was raw from breathing frozen air. The Sasquatch looked back, saw me standing there, and made that same gesture. Follow. I shook my head. Couldn't do it. Couldn't walk blindly toward a wall of rock. But the creature didn't seem concerned. It kept going, and then, impossibly, it disappeared. Not around the cliff, into it. I forced my legs to move, stumbling forward until I reached the spot where it had vanished. That's when I saw it. A narrow opening, maybe 3 feet wide, hidden behind a curtain of icicles and fallen branches. From any other angle, it would have been completely invisible. The entrance to a cave. The creature's head emerged from the darkness, looking at me expectantly. I hesitated at the threshold. Every horror movie I'd ever seen, every cautionary tale about following strangers into dark places screamed at me to stop. But the alternative was dying in the storm. And something about the way it waited, patient, almost gentle, made me think that if it wanted to hurt me, it could have done so already. I ducked through the opening. The change was immediate and disorienting. The wind cut off like someone had closed a door. The temperature was still cold, but without the wind chill, it felt almost warm by comparison. My eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness after the white glare of the storm. As my vision cleared, I realized this wasn't just a cave. It was a shelter. The floor had been deliberately packed down and leveled. Along one wall, I could make out what looked like woven mats made from branches and dried grass. In the center of the space was a fire pit. An actual fire pit, ringed with stones, with a natural chimney above it that vented through a crack in the ceiling. But it was the other details that made my brain stutter. Wooden tools, carved and shaped, arranged neatly along a stone shelf. Containers made from bark and pitch. Bundles of dried plants hanging from rocky outcroppings. This wasn't just a cave someone had stumbled into. This was a home. The Sasquatch moved deeper into the space, and I heard sounds. The scrape of stone on stone, the rustle of dried materials. Then came a spark, another, and suddenly, impossibly, there was fire. Actual fire, created with tools, with intention. The creature knelt beside the growing flames, feeding them carefully with dry wood that had been stored against the back wall. The firelight revealed its face more clearly now. Intelligent eyes, weathered features, an expression of what I could only describe as concentration. I stood there, dripping and shaking, watching a cryptid build a fire. And somewhere in my shutting down brain, a thought formed. What else have we been wrong about? The warmth from the fire should have been a relief, but the Sasquatch wouldn't let me approach it. Every time I stumbled toward the flames, desperate to feel heat on my frozen skin, it moved between me and the fire pit. Not aggressively, but firmly, blocking my path. I didn't understand. Couldn't understand. My thoughts were moving like cold syrup. All I knew was that I was freezing to death, and there was fire right there, and this creature wouldn't let me near it. Then it did something that cut through my confusion. It took my hand. The touch was startling. Rough palm, leathery skin, but surprisingly gentle. It held my hand up to the firelight, examining my blue-white fingers. Then it made a sound, low and almost disapproving. It released my hand and moved to a corner of the cave where several stone basins sat in a row. I watched, barely comprehending, as it poured water from one container into a smaller basin. Not cold water from outside, this had been stored here, protected from freezing. The creature carried the basin to the edge of the fire, warming it. Not boiling it, just warming it. Only later would I understand what it was doing. Re-warming someone with severe hypothermia too quickly can kill them. Send the cold blood from their extremities rushing back to their heart and brain, causing cardiac arrest. Hypothermia victims need to be warmed gradually, carefully. This creature knew that. It brought the basin to me and gestured for me to put my hands in the water. The temperature was barely lukewarm, but after the freezing cold, it felt scalding. I gasped, tried to pull away, but the Sasquatch held my wrists gently, keeping my hands submerged. Its eyes met mine, and somehow I understood. Trust me. So I did. After a few minutes, it allowed me to remove my hands. Then it retrieved something from one of those bark containers, a paste made from crushed plants and what smelled like animal fat. It began rubbing this mixture into my hands and fingers, massaging carefully, working the circulation back into the tissue. The competence was staggering, every movement purposeful. This wasn't instinct or luck. This was knowledge, medical knowledge. Where did it learn this? The question floated through my mind, but couldn't quite land. I was too cold, too exhausted to hold on to complex thoughts. The creature moved to my feet next, removing my ice-caked boots with surprising dexterity. My socks were frozen solid. It peeled them away and examined my toes. Several were white and waxy. Frostbite. The Sasquatch made that disapproving sound again and began the same careful process. Warm water, gentle massage, herbal paste. I should have been terrified.
Should have been questioning every second of this, but the hypothermia had stripped away my capacity for fear, leaving only a strange, floating gratitude. As it worked, I looked around the cave more carefully. The woven mats weren't crude. they showed pattern and planning. The tools weren't random rocks, but shaped implements. Scrapers, cutters, containers. Everything had its place. Everything showed intention. On the wall behind the fire, I noticed something that made my breath catch. Marks carved into the stone. At first, I thought they were random scratches, but as I stared, patterns emerged. Lines connecting points, circles at intersections. It looked almost like a map? Before I could process this, the Sasquatch had finished with my feet and was gesturing for me to move closer to the fire. Not too close. It positioned me at a careful distance, then wrapped one of those woven mats around my shoulders. The material was rough, but surprisingly effective at trapping heat. It handed me the basin of warm water and mimed drinking. I sipped. The water was clean, slightly mineral in taste. As I drank, the creature settled across the fire from me, watching. Not threatening, just watching. Monitoring me the way a doctor monitors a patient. I wanted to say something. Thank you felt absurdly inadequate, and I wasn't even sure it would understand, but I tried anyway. Thank you, I whispered, my voice barely working. The Sasquatch tilted its head slightly. Then, to my shock, it made a sound back. Not words exactly, but a vocalization that seemed almost like acknowledgement. Like it understood that I was trying to communicate. We sat like that for a while, the fire crackling between us, the storm raging outside. My shivering gradually subsided. Feelings started returning to my extremities. Painful, but a good sign. I should have been asking myself 1,000 questions. Should have been panicking about the impossibility of this situation.
But instead, I felt something I hadn't expected. Safe. Though even then, a small part of me wondered, what happens when morning comes? I must have dozed off. The exhaustion and the gradual warmth pulled me under despite my best efforts to stay alert. When I jerked awake, disoriented, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then I saw the massive silhouette across the cave, and it all came rushing back. The Sasquatch was still there, sitting in the same position, watching. Had it been watching me the entire time I slept? The thought should have been unsettling, but somehow it wasn't. There was something almost protective about its vigil, like it was standing guard. Outside, the storm continued to rage. I could hear the wind howling through the rocks, the sharp crack of breaking branches. We were completely cut off from the outside world, trapped in this bubble of firelight and stone. Under any other circumstances, being trapped in a cave with a cryptid would have been my worst nightmare. But the alternative was being out there, freezing, dying. The creature stirred, adding more wood to the fire. Its movements were precise, economical. It built the flames back up to a steady burn, then returned to its watching position. I noticed it was chewing something, a root or dried plant, methodically working it with those powerful jaws. "Can you understand me?" I asked, my voice still rough but stronger than before. It looked at me. No response, but something in its eyes suggested it was listening. "I'm Jack," I said, pointing to myself. "Jack." The Sasquatch tilted its head, studying me. Then it made a sound, a deep, resonant vocalization that seemed to come from its chest. Not a word, but clearly intentional. Was it trying to tell me its name? Or just acknowledging mine? I'd probably never know. The fire popped, sending up a small shower of sparks. The creature's eyes tracked them to the ceiling, then scanned the cave's upper reaches. Something in its posture changed, became alert. I followed its gaze but saw nothing unusual, just rock and shadow. Then I heard it, a sound different from the wind, a grinding, shifting noise that made my stomach clench. Small pebbles were falling from a section of the ceiling near the cave entrance, pattering onto the floor like rain. The Sasquatch stood abruptly. It moved to the entrance, looking up at the rock face above. Another grinding sound,
louder this time. More pebbles. Then a chunk of rock, the size of my fist, broke free and crashed to the ground. The storm was destabilizing the cave entrance. My heart hammered. We were safe from the freezing temperatures, but what good was that if the whole cave system came down on us? I struggled to my feet, still wrapped in the woven mat, and watched as the creature assessed the situation. It didn't panic, didn't freeze. It simply started moving with purpose. The Sasquatch grabbed one of the heavier logs from its woodpile, a massive piece of deadfall that I couldn't have lifted even at full strength. It carried it to the entrance and wedged it at an angle, bracing it against the cave wall. Then it began gathering stones, large ones, and positioning them around the log's base. I understood what it was doing, reinforcing the entrance, creating a support structure to prevent collapse. "Can I help?" I asked, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew the answer. I could barely stand. I'd be useless, probably just get in the way. The creature glanced at me and made a low sound, not hostile, but clear enough. "Stay back." So I watched as it worked, mesmerized by the efficiency of its movements. It wasn't randomly piling rocks. Each stone was carefully selected, positioned to bear weight at specific angles. This was engineering, problem-solving at a sophisticated level. Another section of ceiling crumbled, larger this time. A shelf of rock broke away and tumbled down, missing the Sasquatch by inches. It didn't flinch, just adjusted its strategy, adding more bracing at a different angle. The wind outside had reached a fever pitch. The whole mountain seemed to be groaning under the assault. I thought about all the times I'd been in these mountains, thought I knew them, understood them. But I'd never experienced anything like this. Never seen nature this violent, this indifferent to human life. Without this creature, I'd be dead. No question. The Sasquatch placed a final stone, tested the stability of its structure, then stepped back. It studied its work for a long moment, then seemed satisfied. The grinding sounds had stopped. The reinforcement was holding. It returned to the fire, barely winded from the effort. I noticed its hands as it sat down, scarred, calloused, but nimble. Capable hands. Hands that could build, heal, solve problems. "You saved my life," I said quietly. "Twice now." It looked at me across the flames. Those dark eyes held something I couldn't quite name. Not quite human, but not animal either. Something else entirely. And I realized with a strange certainty, this creature had saved people before. This wasn't the first time. How many other hikers had it watched from the trees? How many had it helped, only to slip away before being seen clearly? The thought raised questions I wasn't ready to contemplate. Not yet. Outside, the storm screamed on into the night. Sleep came in fragments that night. I'd drift off for what felt like minutes, then jerk awake to the sound of wind or shifting rock. Each time, the Sasquatch was there, unmoved, keeping watch. At some point, I stopped fighting the exhaustion and let myself sink deeper. When I woke fully, gray light was filtering through the cave entrance. Dawn. I'd survived the night. The storm had quieted to a dull roar, still dangerous outside, but no longer the apocalyptic fury of the previous day.
The creature was crouched near the entrance, peering out at the transformed landscape. Everything beyond the cave mouth was white and alien. My body ached everywhere. My shoulder throbbed where I'd hit the rocks. My feet and hands burned with the pins and needles sensation of returning circulation. But I was alive, warm. The hypothermia had released its grip. I sat up slowly, and the Sasquatch turned to look at me. It made a soft sound, checking on me, I thought. When it seemed satisfied I was okay, it returned to the fire and began preparing something.
It crushed dried berries in one of the stone basins, mixed them with water, and handed the mixture to me. The taste was tart and slightly bitter, but not unpleasant. Food. Actual food. My stomach cramped with sudden hunger. As I drank, my eyes wandered back to those markings on the cave wall. In the daylight, they were clearer, definitely intentional, definitely meaningful. I stood, legs shaky, and moved closer to examine them. The patterns were more complex than I'd first thought. Lines radiating from central points, symbols that might have been landmarks, triangles that could be mountains, wavy lines that might represent water, and scattered throughout, small circles with marks inside them. Shelters. These were shelters. This wasn't just a map, it was a network, a system of safe places, marked and remembered. How many caves like this one existed in these mountains? How many emergency refuges had this creature, or others like it, established? The implications made my head spin. This suggested planning, forethought, a level of organization that required abstract thinking, memory, communication. All the things we told ourselves separated humans from animals. I reached out to trace one of the lines with my finger, then stopped. This felt sacred somehow, personal. I was a guest here, looking at something I had no right to see. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked aloud, knowing I wouldn't get an answer. "How long have you been watching over these mountains?" The Sasquatch made a sound behind me. I turned to find it holding out another portion of the berry mixture. But it was looking at the wall, too, at the markings. Its expression, if I was reading it correctly, seemed almost wistful. Did it remember making those marks? Or had they been here before, left by others of its kind? Were there others? The questions piled up faster than I could process them. Everything I thought I knew about the world had been upended in the space of 12 hours. Bigfoot was real. Not only real, but intelligent. Capable of medicine, engineering, planning. Living in these mountains all along, unseen, helping lost hikers who'd never know what truly saved them. How many disappearances in these mountains weren't disappearances at all, but rescues? How many people had been led to safety by something they dismissed as imagination or hypothermia-induced hallucination? I thought about all the stories, the folklore, the indigenous legends that white settlers had laughed off as primitive superstition. What if they'd been right all along? What if we'd been the ignorant ones, too arrogant to believe that we weren't the only intelligent species on this continent? The Sasquatch moved to one of the bark containers and pulled out what looked like dried meat. It offered me a piece. I hesitated. What was I eating? Deer? Elk? Then took it. The creature had saved my life. Whatever it was offering, I trusted it wasn't going to poison me now. The meat was tough and smoky, preserved somehow, stored for emergencies like this. As I chewed, I noticed something I'd missed before. Near the back of the cave, partially hidden behind a rocky outcrop, was a small pile of objects. I moved closer, squinting in the dim light. My breath caught. A rusted camping knife, a torn piece of synthetic fabric, a cracked compass, a water bottle with a faded logo. Human objects. Things left behind by other hikers, or things the creature had found, maybe taken from people it had helped. Trophies? No, that didn't feel right. The way they were arranged, carefully placed, almost reverently stored, it felt more like remembrance. Each item represented a person, a life saved, a moment when human and cryptid had crossed paths, however briefly. How many? How many people owed their lives to this creature and never knew it? I turned back to find the Sasquatch watching me again. Our eyes met across the cave, and for a moment, I felt the weight of everything that couldn't be said. The vast gulf between us, and the thin bridge we'd somehow built across it. "Thank you," I said again, inadequate as it was. "For all of them, not just me." The creature held my gaze a moment longer, then looked toward the cave entrance. The light was growing stronger. The storm was breaking. It was almost time to leave. By mid-morning, the wind had dropped to occasional gusts. The freezing rain had stopped, replaced by light snow that fell in lazy spirals. The worst had passed. We both knew it. The Sasquatch moved around the cave with purpose now, gathering certain items, returning others to their places. It was preparing for something. Preparing me to leave, I realized. Part of me didn't want to go. The rational part of my brain knew that was insane. I needed medical attention, needed to get warm food and proper rest, needed to let people know I was alive. But another part of me understood that leaving this cave meant leaving behind something I'd never experience again. This moment, this impossible connection. How could I explain this to anyone? Who would believe me? The creature approached with one of the woven mats and wrapped it around my shoulders like a cloak. Then it handed me a bark container filled with the berry mixture and some of the dried meat. Provisions for the journey out. I took them, and our hands touched briefly. Its skin was warm, weathered, startlingly human in texture, despite the coarse hair covering most of its body. "I won't tell anyone," I said suddenly. The words came out before I'd fully formed the thought. "About you, about this place. I won't bring people here." The Sasquatch tilted its head, studying me. Could it understand the promise I was making? Did it even care? But something in its eyes suggested it did understand. That it had heard promises before. Maybe some had been kept, maybe others hadn't. It gestured toward the entrance. Time to go. I followed it out into the transformed world. The landscape was unrecognizable under 2 feet of fresh snow. Ice coated every surface, turning trees into crystal sculptures and rocks into death traps. The temperature had dropped even further, probably in the single digits. Without the wind, it was survivable, but just barely. The Sasquatch moved ahead, breaking trail through the deep snow. Its size was an advantage here. It could push through drifts that would have swallowed me. Every few yards, it would stop and look back, making sure I was keeping up. My legs were weak, my shoulders screaming with every movement, but I pushed forward. The alternative was staying in that cave forever, and we both knew that wasn't possible. We traveled for what felt like hours. The sun climbed higher, but provided almost no warmth. My breath crystallized in the air. My feet were numb again, despite the herbal paste. But I kept moving, following those massive footprints through the snow. The creature led me along routes I never would have found on my own. We skirted cliff faces, crossed frozen streams at their narrowest points, avoided areas where the snow had piled into unstable cornices. It knew this terrain intimately. Every dangerous spot, every safe passage. At one point, we crossed what I was certain was the same rocky slope where I'd fallen and lost my backpack. In daylight, I could see how lucky I'd been. Another 10 feet, and I would have gone over a ledge into a ravine. The Sasquatch paused there, looking down into that drop, then back at me. I wondered if it had watched me fall, if it had been following me even then, before revealing itself. We climbed higher, traversing a ridge I didn't recognize. The view was spectacular. Miles of white wilderness stretching in every direction, untouched and pristine. No sign of human presence anywhere. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Then I saw something that made my heart leap. Below us, maybe half a mile away, a familiar rock formation. The Devil's Tooth, a landmark I knew. I was oriented now, knew where I was. The trailhead was less than 3 miles from here. The Sasquatch had stopped. It stood at the edge of the ridge, looking down at that landmark. Then it turned to me and made a gesture I understood immediately. "This is where we part ways." "No," I said, surprising myself. "Come a little further, just to make sure I—" But it was already shaking its head. A very human gesture, very deliberate. This was as far as it would go, too close to civilization, too close to being seen. I understood, but it still hurt. I'd been with this creature for less than 24 hours, but the bond felt deeper than that. It had seen me at my most vulnerable, had cared for me when I couldn't care for myself, had trusted me with its secrets. And now it was time to say goodbye to something the world said didn't exist. I set down the bark container and unwrapped the mat from my shoulders, holding it out. The creature needed these things more than I did, but it wouldn't take them. It gestured for me to keep them, pushed the items back toward me when I tried again to return them. Insurance, I realized, to make sure I made it out alive. "I won't forget this," I said, my voice thick. "I won't forget you." The Sasquatch watched me for a long moment. Then it did something that stopped my breath. It reached out and placed one massive hand on my shoulder. Gently, carefully. The same shoulder I'd injured. The gesture was unmistakable. A blessing, a farewell, a moment of connection that transcended language. Then it turned and walked back into the wilderness, its footprints disappearing into the trees. I stood there until I couldn't see it anymore, until there was nothing but white snow and dark trees and the memory of something impossible. Then I started walking towards civilization, carrying secrets I'd never share. The hike down took me 3 hours. Every step was agony. My body was running on fumes, pushed far past any reasonable limit. But the berry mixture kept me going, and the woven mat kept the worst of the cold at bay. Twice I had to stop and rest, leaning against trees, fighting the urge to just sit down in the snow and close my eyes. But I didn't. I kept moving, kept thinking about that promise I'd made. When I finally stumbled into the parking area, my truck sat alone, buried under a foot of snow. The sight of it, that ordinary, mundane piece of my regular life, felt surreal after everything that had happened. I was back. Back in the world of machines and roads and explanations. The ranger station was another 2 miles down the mountain road. I drove slowly, carefully, my hands barely able to grip the wheel. When I pulled into the parking lot, 2 rangers came running out, their faces shocked. "Jesus Christ, Miller! We thought you were dead. We've had search teams looking for you since yesterday afternoon." I sat in the station for 2 hours, wrapped in emergency blankets, sipping hot coffee that tasted like heaven. A paramedic checked me over. Mild frostbite on 3 toes, deep bruising on my shoulder, dehydration, early-stage hypothermia that had somehow resolved itself. "You're incredibly lucky," she said. "Another few hours and we'd be having a very different conversation." The rangers wanted my statement, wanted to know exactly what had happened, where I'd sheltered, how I'd survived. I told them I'd found a cave, that I'd managed to start a fire using dry materials I'd found inside, that I'd waited out the storm and made my way down at first light. They accepted it. Why wouldn't they? It was the logical explanation, the rational one. Nobody asked about the woven mat I'd left in my truck. Nobody questioned the bark container I'd hidden in my coat pocket. Nobody wondered why my story had convenient gaps, moments where the timeline didn't quite add up. "You've been hiking these mountains for 20 years, one ranger said. "Good thing you know them so well." I nodded. Didn't mention that knowing them had almost gotten me killed. That something else, something impossible, had saved me. Over the next few days, I noticed things. Small things. A news report about another hiker who'd gone missing in the same area 3 years ago, only to turn up alive and confused, unable to explain how he'd survived. A forum post from a backpacker
who swore she'd been led to safety by something large she'd only glimpsed through the fog. Old newspaper clippings about unexplained rescues, missing persons who'd walked out of the wilderness days later with fragmented memories and no clear explanation. The pattern was there if you knew to look for it, but nobody was looking. Why would they? I went back to work, went back to my life. Friends asked about my close call, and I gave them the abbreviated version, the rational version. I showed them my frostbitten toes and bruised shoulder as evidence, and they nodded sympathetically and told me how lucky I'd been. And I was lucky, just not in the way they thought. At night, I'd take out the bark container, study its construction, the precision of its weaving. I'd think about those cave markings, that network of shelters scattered across the mountains. I'd remember the feel of that massive hand on my shoulder, the intelligence in those dark eyes. The world kept spinning. People kept living their lives, confident in what was real and what wasn't. Confident that they knew all the players on the field, all the intelligences sharing this planet. They had no idea. Part of me wanted to tell someone, to share what I'd experienced, to prove that there was more to these mountains than anyone suspected. But every time I considered it, I'd remember that promise, that moment of trust. And I'd remember the pile of objects in the back of that cave, the knife, the compass, the water bottle, evidence of other encounters, other rescues. If that creature had wanted to be known, it could have revealed itself 100 times over. It chose not to. Chose to help from the shadows and disappear back into legend. Who was I to betray that choice? But the knowledge changed me, changed how I saw the wilderness, how I moved through it. I hiked differently now, more carefully, more respectfully, understanding that I was a guest in a world far more complex than I'd imagined. Sometimes, on solo hikes, I'd catch myself looking for signs, footprints that were too large, too deep, broken branches at heights no bear could reach, the sense of being watched from the tree line. I never saw it again, never found another trace, but I knew it was there. Them. However many there were, living in the spaces between human awareness, maintaining their ancient vigil over these mountains, saving people who'd never know what saved them. The secret sat heavy in my chest. Some days it felt like a burden, other days like a gift. The knowledge that the world was stranger, richer, more full of wonder than we allowed ourselves to believe. I'd gone into those mountains thinking I understood them. I'd come out knowing I understood almost nothing, and somehow that felt right. 6 months have passed since that storm. 6 months of carrying this secret, of living between two versions of reality. The official version, lucky hiker survives freak weather, and the truth that I'll never be able to prove. I've been back to those mountains dozens of times since, never to that specific cave. I couldn't find it even if I wanted to, and part of me suspects it wouldn't let itself be found. But I hike the same trails, camp in the same wilderness areas, always watching, always aware. Last month, I found something, a depression in the snow near where I'd fallen, where my backpack had disappeared into the storm. I dug down, more out of curiosity than hope, and my fingers hit nylon. My backpack, buried but intact. Everything was still inside. My emergency supplies, my fire starter, my headlamp, all the things I'd needed to survive, returned to a place where I might eventually find them. Someone had brought it back, placed it carefully, covered it to protect it from scavengers. I sat there in the snow for an hour, holding that backpack, understanding what it meant. The creature, or one like it, was still watching, still aware of me, still, in its own way, caring.
That's when I knew I had to tell this story. Not to the rangers or the media or the scientific community. They'd demand proof I couldn't give, evidence that would put that creature at risk. But maybe there are others like me out there, others who've experienced something they can't explain, others who carry impossible secrets. If you're listening to this and you've seen something in those mountains, something that doesn't fit the official story, you're not alone. You're not crazy. And maybe, just maybe, you understand why some truths need to stay in the shadows. I think about that cave often, about the network of shelters mapped on those walls, about how many years, decades, centuries it must have taken to build that system, about the intelligence and compassion required to maintain it.
We think we're the stewards of these wild places, the caretakers, the intelligent ones. But what if we've had it backwards all along? What if we're the ones being watched over, protected by something older and wiser than we can imagine? The scientists will say I hallucinated, that hypothermia created false memories, that my brain invented a savior to cope with trauma. Maybe they're right. Maybe that's the comfortable explanation. But I still have the woven mat. I still have the bark container. I still have 3 toes with frostbite scars that should have been worse. And I still have the memory of those eyes, intelligent, ancient, kind, looking at me across a fire in a hidden cave. Before I finish, I want to ask you something. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think differently about what might be out there in the wild places, leave a comment below. Tell me about your experiences, the things you've seen that don't have easy explanations. And if you want to hear more stories like this, hit that subscribe button, because there are more secrets in these mountains than any of us realize. Some people spend their whole lives searching for proof of the extraordinary. They want photographs, DNA evidence, bodies. They want to capture and catalog and explain. But I learned something in that cave. Some things aren't meant to be proven. Some mysteries deserve to stay mysterious. Some intelligences deserve to remain hidden, free to live as they've always lived, undisturbed by our need to document everything we touch. I made a promise in that cave, and I'm keeping it. The location stays secret. The specifics stay vague. That creature's sanctuary remains protected. But the truth of what happened, the fundamental truth that we share this world with something remarkable, something that chooses to help us even though we've given it every reason to hide, that truth I can share. 3 days in a hidden cave with a creature I never believed existed showed me intelligence and compassion beyond anything I thought possible. It showed me that the line between human and animal, between myth and reality, is far blurrier than we want to admit. I went into that storm thinking I understood these mountains, thinking I knew what was possible and what wasn't, thinking I was alone. I was wrong about all of it, and I've never been more grateful to be wrong. The wilderness keeps its secrets, but sometimes, if you're lucky or unlucky enough, it shares one with you. And when it does, you're left with a choice: dismiss it as impossible, or accept that the world is stranger and more wonderful than you ever imagined. I know which choice I made. Now I hike these mountains differently. I move with more respect, more awareness. I leave offerings sometimes, dried food, medical supplies, tools, in places where they might be found by something that could use them. I never see them taken, but they're always gone when I return. Small gifts for a debt I can never repay. The creature saved my life, but more than that, it saved my sense of wonder, my ability to believe in things larger than myself, my connection to a world that refuses to be fully known or controlled.
That's the real gift, the one I'll carry for the rest of my life. So here's my final thought for anyone listening. The next time you're in the wilderness, in those deep places where cell phones don't work and trails fade into nothing, pay attention. Watch the shadows. Notice what doesn't quite fit. Because you're not alone out there. You never were.